Hi, welcome to the Idaho Immunization Program's 2016 Childcare Immunization Requirements webinar. My name is Marin Axtell and I will be your webinar moderator. The agenda today will start with a review of the Childcare Immunization Requirements along with a walkthrough of our online childcare resources. We will finish with a look at IRIS and any questions you may have. During the webinar, you can also privately or publicly message me your questions. I will now introduce your webinar presenter, Ms. Elle Moore. Ms. Elle is an Immunization Outreach and Assessment Coordinator for the program. You may remember her if you attended our 2015 Give It a Shot Child Care Education Night training. Welcome, Ms. Elle, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Marin, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. The program thought it would be a great idea to try and create a training webinar to help with any questions you may have with your child care's immunization requirements. I'm going to start by doing a review of the basic requirements for child care, and then we're going to spend some time looking at online resources and discussing some common difficulties you may encounter regarding child care records in your child care, your daycare, or your preschool. Our program has been fortunate enough to work with Idaho Stars to create a training video for you to use as a resource. And so this webinar recording will be posted by Idaho Stars. If you're watching the recorded version already, then you should be able to watch this recording on your own time. And if you're interested in receiving a 1-hour training credit from Idaho Stars, then you simply need to follow the steps for doing so. For our objectives today, I want to review child care immunization requirement information with you and hopefully enable you to determine whether or not a child attending your daycare has a complete immunization record. I also want to show you how to use our program's resources and hopefully get to walk through a couple IRIS demonstrations with you. And here's just another note letting you know that this is a collaboration with Idaho Stars. Again, the purpose of creating a recorded video is to allow you to view this information at your convenience. This is something new we're trying. When our program did in-person trainings last year, we were told that many child care providers had difficulty attending due to scheduling. And we know you're busy throughout the day. So sit back, relax, grab a snack or a cup of coffee if you like, and let's get started. We'll begin with the immunization requirements. Here they are with the recommended ages. There's only one schedule, and so if children are behind on schedule, on this particular schedule, they will follow what we call the catch-up schedule. But please note that schedule, when children are catching up, it's still based on one schedule, and this is the schedule in its entirety for child care in the state of Idaho. I want to point out at the bottom you'll see a few notes. These notes refer to a few common situations, but I want to make sure you're aware that there are many, many more notes with this schedule. This is just a small snippet of all the other notes that go along with this schedule for child care immunizations. You can see, I'll just briefly go through the screen here. Of course, you can read them also. DTaP, that's your diphtheria, your tetanus and pertussis vaccine. Polio. MMR is your measles, mumps, and rubella. Hepatitis B, known as Hep B. Haemophilus influenza type B, we call that HIB. And there's two different shots they can get. They can get the ACT-HIB or the PEDVAX-HIB. That's what's showing on here. Varicella, that refers to the chickenpox vaccine. Hepatitis A is known as Hep A. Pneumococcal is next to Hep A here on your screen. That's also required. And rotavirus. And I'll briefly go through these notes in case they may be confusing. When it comes to your DTaP vaccine, the first one listed here on our screen, if the child received the 4th dose when they were 4 years or older. Then the 5th dose isn't usually necessary. Now, there are some exceptions here. Usually that 4th dose needs to be 6 months after the dose before, but we won't get into that too much today. You can always contact me if you have questions regarding this. You'll also see that there's a note for polio. And so polio kind of backtracks a little from DTaP. So the 4th dose of polio, since there's only 4 required, it may not be needed if the 3rd dose was given at age 4 or older. And then again, at least 6 months after the last dose. So you can see 4 is sort of the cutoff age we have when we determine if a child needs more DTaP or polio. I also want to note that your HIB, the Haemophilus influenza type B, that vaccine along with the pneumococcal vaccine, it's not recommended after age 5. So you might notice that if a child is older than 5, then this is no longer required for them to attend childcare. Another note for rotavirus, you can see some of these shots, they're given quite young, and so after a child is 8 months old, rotavirus is also not recommended to be given. Again, the schedule, it can be, there's a lot of different scenarios that go along with this schedule, so we can talk about it later as we move on. I like this guide, and I like to show it because I think I like the green and the red because it kind of shows where you are when it comes to compliance and following the law or the code, as we would say, for the state when it comes to immunization requirements in childcare. You can read through it, but these are your basic, we call this the status guide, and these are your basic statuses that you would have with a child in your childcare. I consider them to be put in this green box when they're meeting the immunization requirements. So they're following the law, they're following the code for immunizations. They're either complete, so they have everything they need. They're conditionally admitted, so they're catching up probably, and they can't get any more right now, but they're on schedule to get more and catch up to be complete. Or you can see the third status here is exempt, and that's when, of course, a child will file an exemption form or their parent will file an exemption form for them, whether this be for medical, religious, or personal reasons. Now the red box below this is when we want to be worried, and this is when we want to pay attention, because if you have a child that's either incomplete or they don't have a record at all, you are not in compliance with the code or the state law, and therefore some steps need to be taken, whether you need to talk to the parents or send a legal notice out. We'll talk about legal notices later, how to do that if you're not familiar in IRIS. And this is also, it can be very difficult in an outbreak situation. If these children are not caught up, they would most likely be sent home if there was something like a large chickenpox outbreak or a measles outbreak, something like that. So let's talk about compliance and how to stay in that green box we see here, because that's where you want to be in your childcare. Keep those kids healthy and happy. Here's the attendance policy when you're in compliance. And so the code states that the immunization requirements need to be met within 14 days of initial attendance. And that's with any licensed facility, childcare facility, daycare. So they do have 14 days to get caught up, and that gives you time to let the parent know if there's missing anything or not. School requirements are a little stricter. We won't go into that, but schools actually require them at entry. So there's a little more leniency with childcare. I just want to point that out. And you want to have a hard copy of the immunization record that the parent gives you. your checklist. So when mom or dad, when they hand you a record, this is what you're going to be looking at to make sure it's a valid record, to make sure you can keep it on file. I've highlighted the name and the birth date. Those are obviously the most important things. We can't match immunizations if we don't know the name, obviously, and then if we don't know the birth date, we don't know if the child's on schedule with the right vaccines. This is an example of what an immunization card looks like for the state, but there are different types of records. You'll see records printed out from a provider's office. And when I say provider, I mean a healthcare provider, a doctor or a nurse or a health department. And there are minimum intervals between shots. And what that means, for example, is with a shot like hepatitis A, a child needs 2 doses of hepatitis A, but those doses have to be separated by 6 months. So 6 months is the interval when they're receiving the hepatitis A vaccine between the first shot and the second shot. There needs to be 6 months in between. And each shot has different minimum intervals. We have something called a 4-day grace period. Some vaccines can be given up to 4 days early. So we're looking at those minimum intervals. We're looking at the age that the vaccine is supposed to be given. Please keep in mind this does not apply to all vaccines. There are certain vaccines that this rule will not apply to, but for quite a few of them this does apply. And so there's a little leniency there also when kids are catching up so they don't have to go to the doctor too many times, that sort of deal. Now, if it's been more than 4 days, 5 days earlier or more, that vaccine it needs to be repeated. It's not valid. So 4 days is the cutoff when we're giving vaccines early, when the doctor is. And when we're looking at compliance, we want to make sure that we're aware of the exemptions. Parents do have the right to file an exemption for their child, whether it be for medical, religious, or philosophical reasons. If they want to file a medical exemption, they need a doctor's signature. And so if they can't get a doctor's signature, then this would probably go down as a religious or a philosophical exemption. Some examples for a medical exemption, it could be an allergy, it's really up to the doctor's judgment. So maybe the doctor has decided at the time that the child should not receive a certain vaccine, and so we just have to have a signature if we want a medical exemption for a child. Otherwise, if the parent doesn't want their child to have vaccinations, it's certainly their choice, but we consider that a philosophical exemption, or of course religious would go under whatever religious reason they have for exempting their children from vaccines. And please keep in mind also, when children are exempted, when they have an exemption form on file, if there's an outbreak, if there's a measles outbreak, it's happened in other states. Luckily we haven't had one in Idaho in recent years, but they can be excluded from child care. And so parents need to be aware of this. It says it on the form, but not everyone is aware that their child can be taken out of daycare if there's an outbreak. And it's not just for measles, there's other diseases also if they're not vaccinated against them. Let's talk a little bit about exemption misuse, because it does happen and we are aware that this happens throughout the state, unfortunately. I want to emphasize that exemptions, they're not an easy way out, and that's really not the intention of having them. It's the right of the parent, again, but it's not your right or anyone else's right to force an exemption onto a parent. We do hear about this happening sometimes. It is the parent's decision. And it's really also not supposed to be a way to get out of a doctor's visit for convenience reasons. And so sometimes you'll see here, we do hear, I don't have a record, I lost my record, I moved out of state, or I can't get a doctor's appointment in time. Those are not reasons to file an exemption. It's very important, I think, to be clear when we're talking about the right of a parent and then trying to basically endanger the health of other children by filing something that's just easier than going to the doctor and getting your vaccinations. Now back to when you receive a record from a parent when they're having their kids start at your daycare or childcare. I personally recommend that you look in IRIS first. Look at the record, look at IRIS. Maybe they don't have a record. If the parent is saying they don't have a record and they're trying to either file an exemption out of convenience or say that they moved and they just don't have the record at all. When they move, there's actually a different scenario or different steps you would take. But for missing records, just check in IRIS, or maybe a kid's record is incomplete. Look in IRIS. You never know. We try and keep it as updated as we can, but we also depend on child cares and schools to fax us records so that we can update IRIS in a timely fashion so that everyone's on the same page. Medical providers and doctors, nurses, the health department, they can also see these records. And also you can access them. We'll go through IRIS in a minute. If anyone, I know many of you use IRIS. I get calls from you quite often. But for those of you that aren't familiar with IRIS, this is kind of a snippet as to how it forecasts or predicts the vaccines a child will need. And it lets you know when they're past due on vaccinations or what's the earliest date they can get a vaccination. I also want to point out that IRIS is online, and so any kind of password resets or accounts that you want to create, this has to be done online. We ask that you give our IRIS team 5 business days to respond to your request. Usually they're pretty quick about it. Usually within 24 hours, our IRIS team will get back with you and have you at least give you the steps via email onto how to set up your account. But that's just a note. So maybe mom doesn't have a record and you looked in IRIS and the child doesn't have a record also. Or in this case, maybe mom gives you a record and it's just, you're really not sure, you don't know if the child's up to date or not, there's dates and shots everywhere, it looks confusing, and they're not in IRIS, so you can't verify using IRIS. Please send us the record. You can send it to IRIS. It's no cost to you. We prefer that you fax them. That's the most confidential way to keep that child's medical information confidential. I'll be giving you the fax number here shortly for you to keep on your records. Now let's talk about implementing a policy that works for you, that can keep you and your child care in compliance with the state requirements. I know it can sound scary sometimes. You don't want to turn kids away for not being up to date. So let's see what we can do when you're creating a policy in your child care to make sure everyone is caught up on their vaccinations. And again, they have 14 days to receive their vaccinations. So if it's been 14 days and you're not getting a record, you're not getting anything, the child should not be admitted into your daycare. And you want to make sure your staff, anyone that's looking at these immunization records, you want to make sure that they are aware of these rules. You, of course, would exclude children when they need to be excluded. If maybe they were fine when they started, but they never got that last hepatitis A shot. And so in that case, you of course would want to let the parent know, but if you keep getting feedback from the parent saying that they can't get a doctor's appointment, it's been a month, it's been 2 months, you are supposed to exclude these children from daycare or childcare or preschool, whichever it may be. Now, a great way to implement your policy is to start with legal notices. And what I want to do here is I just want to pause quickly I'll just take a break from our presentation, and I'm going to go and see if I can enter IRIS here and show you how to generate a legal notice. I think that will be helpful. One second here while I'm pulling up Explorer. I'm just going to take you to our immunization program website. It's immunizeidaho.com. I'm just typing into my browser. And this is what you should see. This is the main page of the Idaho Immunization Program's website. If you can see my mouse here, I'm just going to wave it over the section for information for schools and childcare. And second on the list is IRIS login. This is the easiest way for me to get into IRIS. This is how I do it pretty much every day. You'll have a username and password. And as you can see, once you open the IRIS screen, the instructions are there for you. So it reiterates. IRIS accounts and new passwords, they must be submitted online. We can't do it over the phone. If you need to reset your password, you can click on these links here. It takes you right to the reset screen. And if you're new and you want an IRIS account, you would click down under Child Care Provider to request this account. I'm going to log in right now, excuse me. I log in under childcare, your screen will go straight here. So let's see. I'm going to try and find a childcare. See if we can do a legal notice if we need one. I like to type in the birthday first. This is just an example, not a real record, but you'll see how it works. Child's name here is Mona Lisa. Creative, I know. And this is what you're looking at when you're looking at a record in IRIS. This child's pretty behind, so they need, if you look down for what they need here, it has a past due date that's highlighted, and over on the left-hand side, you'll see the vaccines that are listed. So they're past due for hepatitis A, for MMR, and for polio. And they've been that way for a while. And so if this child is in your daycare, if you haven't caught it before, you're obviously going to want to send a legal notice to the parent. And the way you do this is you have the record open, as you see, and you click under the Reports tab. It's kind of under where the status and the color of the status is next to Edit Patient. Just click Reports, and there should be a link for you to have a legal notice. This happens whenever a child's incomplete. You'll also see that you can print this report in English and Spanish. The deadline should automatically populate 2 weeks for you. So let's click and see what this looks like. There we go. It just does the work for you. We recommend using this whenever you need to. It has all the doses listed that the child needs. There's an X in the box, as you can see. It will have your information on there. That's my information since I'm the user today. And just mail it home. Easy peasy. Keep a record on copy at your child care when you send it home, so you have it on file so that if mom or dad says they never got one, you have a copy to show that you sent one out. Pretty simple. Let's close out of there. Now let's go back to our presentation. Just a few notes for the legal notice. As you saw, it automatically shows the vaccines the kid needs. You don't have to do the math. You don't have to do the figuring out. You can print them off and send them home, and then keep a copy. We also have what's called the conditional admission form. Sort of the same idea of a legal notice, but with conditional admission, we see a child's catching up. So we're going to try and keep them in child care as long as they're making the effort, parents are making the effort to get them caught up in vaccinations. Again, you can print these off, keep a copy. So the child can be in that green zone in compliance while they're catching with vaccinations. And I'll just forward, I think I have a quick example I can just show you. We'll go back to our IRIS screen. I'm going to find another child here, an example. This is obviously an older child, probably would not be in your daycare, but we're going by the status here. So you'll see IRIS is showing them as conditionally attending. Let's do the same thing we did with the legal notice. Let's go to the reports button. So instead of a legal notice link here, you'll see there's a conditional attendance link. Click on that, and it's a different form. Different formats, but it populates the name, the birth date, the shots that are needed are circled here. It also gives the date. It's kind of nice. It has another copy of the schedule, especially if they're catching up. And so you and the parent can keep this on file until they get all caught up and they'll be in compliance. Just some great ways to implement your policy. Let's go back. So enroll online. I say use IRIS to manage your records. This is just a brief snippet of all the things you can do in IRIS. We have things such as creating lists. We have some videos coming out. They've already been recorded. I'm very happy to say about how to manage a list. in IRIS. It really makes things a lot easier, especially if you have a large number of children in your daycare or childcare. Feel free to contact us if you're having issues with IRIS, and know where to find some forms and resources. I'm briefly just going to go through the website with you. So again, this is immunizeidaho.com. That's just what you type in to get here. Let's go into your section, childcare again. I'm going to scroll down, click on Childcare Requirements. Another copy of the schedule here. You'll see in mid-page, right next to IRIS, this is another way to get to IRIS, but let's go back. Oops, 1 second. I'll get back to where we were, Childcare Requirements. Click on Forms and Resources in the middle of your page. They're quite spaced out for some reason, but here you'll see the second form. It's the Idaho Certificate of Immunization Exemption form for childcare. You can see it's in English and Spanish. We'll click on Spanish. Here's what that exemption form looks like if you haven't seen one. Parent has to fill it out. See if it'll, there we go. Should be a front and back. You can print this out for them. They can print it out themselves. Keep a copy on file. And they can explain here. There has to be an explanation. So whether it's for religious, medical, or philosophical, they need to write an explanation, sign it, and that is the state form. Let's see what else we have. The Invalid Vaccination form, we'll go over this in just a few minutes. But this is what we give to a doctor when a shot was maybe not given on time, was given too early, earlier than the 4-day rule that we allow. You can see these forms, they're all online, all at your fingertips here. I'm going to go back. We also have what is called the resource order form. I'm going to click on this. This is where you can order free resources from us. You want to go under School and Childcare Resources when you're in here. I'm going to click on that tab. Scroll down. This is all information on immunizations. Click Next. And under School and Childcare Resources, you'll see what's called the Green Childcare Health Folders. These can help you organize immunizations. A lot of childcares find it easy to use when they're organizing records. The Childcare Teddy Bear, something else you can order. The Childcare Teddy Bear, lots of childcares have been using this and we get really good feedback. I'm going to see if I can click on it. Nope, just kidding. Oh, there it is. Gives you a close-up if you haven't seen it. And so you have your schedule in the form of a cute bear. The ages, they go by the ages that the vaccines are recommended. And it's something nice to hang on your wall to keep track of. So you don't, maybe you don't want to, might not always have the time to go online and research all of this, so you can order these. Great resource for you. Let's go back. Down at the bottom here, you can see the parent guide to childcare requirements. We're going to update that to 2016 very soon. It's mostly the same, though. You can order these so you can send them home to parents every year. I believe that might be it. Yep. just a few things you can use, a few tools to help you with your maintaining your policy, making sure everyone's caught up. So I'm going to close out here. Let's continue with our presentation a little longer. We've got about 10 more minutes. So I would first like to see if anyone has any questions so far. We've got a few scenarios we could talk about, but.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
So at my child care, a parent handed me an exemption form they made on their own. Can I accept this?
No. Did it look like they just went on their computer and printed out their own exemption form, or?
Yeah, almost like they had typed like a letter, but still using the same verbiage that's in the legal documents online.
That would be a no, a very big no.
Okay.
It does happen, though. It happens. We see it sometimes. For some reason, parents don't like the form set aside by the state, and so they want to make their own form because maybe they think it sounds nicer or for whatever reason. But no, all exemption forms and invalid forms, as you saw online, those are state forms, state documents. Those are the only valid documents. They can't alter those forms in any way, so they can't cross out words on the form. It's not considered valid. They have to fill out the form completely. If they want to add their opinion on there, certainly the philosophical statement, that's what that's for. Sometimes they want to write things on the side, that's fine, but they cannot change that form. But thank you for that question because it does come up.
And then my second question was, the legal notice in IRIS is printing out wrong. It's showing that the child needs hepatitis A when they do not. So what should I do if that happens?
I hate that happened. It does happen, though. Sometimes there are some small glitches. We do try and work with IRIS regularly to make sure it's operating like it should be, but every now and then we come across something that might not be populating right. So if that is happening, I say give me a call. It would be good just to verify and make sure. And what I usually have child cares do is after I talk to them, it just takes a minute because I want to see what's going on, basically. That's why I want you to contact me first. Hopefully, so it's hopefully something we can fix for the future.
Okay.
Yeah, and in that case, I would just have you probably initial by it and change it so that it's showing correctly, probably by hand or with a pen for now. But yeah, please contact me if you see that happening. And you can of course let me know later and we can go through it real quick.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there's any more questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run through some scenarios. So if you have questions, feel free to pop in. Since we just have a little bit more time, I want to go through some case studies with you, what I like to call case studies. There's just some scenarios that we have, some common ones that I want to, maybe these sound familiar. If not, they might in the future. There's just a couple. So with scenario 1 here, I'm just going to read it. You can read it to yourself. So Ms. Walker and her family recently moved to Idaho from another state. She wants to enroll her daughter Katie into your daycare. When you look at Katie's record, you notice that Katie's missing a few shots. Ms. Walker tells you that her daughter is following a delayed immunization schedule that was approved by their doctor in another state. And so the question here is, there's 2 of them. Should Katie be allowed into your daycare today? And does Mrs. Walker, does she need to fill out any extra forms to be in compliance with Idaho code? And so let's see. Our first question, do we let her into the daycare? Yes. As we talked about earlier, she has 14 days to become into compliance with the state code. So I say it's a pretty fair amount of time. And does Ms. Walker need to fill out any more forms? She will need to fill out an exemption form if she wants Katie to stay in delayed schedule. As I talked about earlier, there's only one schedule here. So if she's saying she's on a delayed schedule from another doctor, that's not really following the rules. Now, if she wants to visit a doctor in Idaho that's going to give her a medical exemption for whatever reason, she's certainly free to try and do that. But if she can't get a signature from a doctor for a medical exemption, this would be considered what we call a philosophical exemption. So she would fill out the philosophical exemption section of the exemption form. Something else you might want to bring up with her is maybe putting Katie on a catch-up schedule. It's a great opportunity to try and catch her up, get her caught up with vaccines. And in this case, if she goes to the doctor and she gets the ones that she needs, then we can give her a conditional admission form. And that's a scenario that was taken from last year from a child care that contacted me. Let's talk about our second scenario. Here's Henry. He's a 3-year-old. He's entering your daycare. And when you receive his record, you look to see if it's also an iris. It is an iris, but you notice that iris has put down not valid for his second hepatitis A shot. It looks like it was given about a week too early. And so his mom says that she knows this, and she's talked to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician told her that the shot's fine. And so your question should probably be, again, should he be allowed into your daycare as of today, and what forms need to be filled out in this case? I think next we have an iris printout here, and this gives you an idea of what we're talking about. So I mentioned earlier with the hepatitis A vaccine, there has to be 6 months in between the 2 doses that are required for the child to enter daycare. As in this record here, it looks like, there was barely 3 months in between. And so I'll wave my mouse over the not valid. Oops. This is what it looks like when iris is counting a shot as not valid. And that's why it was given too early. It happens sometimes, so let's see what the answers are with this case. Should he be admitted to your daycare? Hopefully you know the answer already. Yes. He can be admitted. He has 14 days to get caught up. And what forms does mom need to fill out? Since this is what we call an invalid dose, iris is showing it as invalid, as we saw earlier, they can go back and find the invalid vaccination form from our website, where all the forms were next to the exemptions. This form actually it gives you a little more time. So the child has 30 days to get caught up on an invalid vaccination. Now, if the doctor decides that the vaccination is fine, they have to sign on this form. It has to be a doctor's signature. It can't be a nurse or whoever is giving the shot that's basically not a doctor. So if you're given a signed copy of this form by a doctor, then Henry will be caught up. Or hopefully they'll just revaccinate him, and then you won't have to worry about it. He'll just be caught up, and you'll have proof of that. I don't know if we're going to have time to go through this today. I just wanted to give you some visuals about real diseases that have happened quite recently. This was taken this month in 2016, and it just gives sort of a summary from the CDC of measles cases. And you can see we've got a neighboring state. I know Oregon was a neighboring state in 2014. So they're very real, and they are happening. A lot of them were associated with the Disneyland outbreak, if anyone's familiar with that. But the numbers are still pretty high. So in 2014, there were 667 cases, and there were still 189 cases in 2015. Just so you can see, this is something that still happens, and vaccinations are a great way to keep these from happening. And sometimes they're low for child care centers. Fortunately, we have the health department that will do compliance visits with you to make sure that you're all up to date. But this is why. We know that in some places they're low, so if there is an outbreak, it's very dangerous, just unnecessary suffering that children are having to go through by not being caught up on their vaccinations. I also wanted to note that for schools, we do keep track of this data, but for child carers, it's mostly your district, your health department, your compliance officer. They're the ones keeping track for child carers. And so it's still work that needs to be done here, especially in Idaho. And that's a wrap for our training. I want to give you my contact information. And if there's not any other questions, I'm going to let Marin wrap up with you. Thank you again. I hope this was helpful. Please use this as a resource whenever you need to. There's some great walkthroughs through the website. And so, Marin?
All right, yeah, thank you, Ms. L. That will conclude today's webinar. If you have any questions that didn't get answered today, you can contact Ms. L by phone at 208-334-6994. or email her at more@1, that's MOOREM1 @dhw.idaho.gov. And if you need a record to be put into IRIS, please fax those to 334-6590. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks for all that you do.